Welcome to the Pixel Professor podcast, where we take an academic deep dive into the cultural and artistic phenomenon that is video games. It is April 22nd, 2024, and I'm Erock Tenor, joined by...
Jeff Swift, also known on the interwebs as just Swift.
Swift PhD.
That's how people on the Minecraft servers refer to me.
Yes, obviously, Swift PhD. I mean, you gotta get your money's worth. Okay, well, first question. I almost didn't ask this. What media are you consuming that is worth recommending? What are you playing, first of all? Most important, games.
I'm stuck on Helldivers and Raven's Watch.
I don't think we've talked about Raven's Watch. That's new since our last podcast, right?
That is true.
We started that one the night that the day after we recorded our last episode. So
That's right.
tell us about Raven's Watch.
It is something that I'd never heard of before. It's called a roguelike. You have never mentioned it before.
Never mentioned
We
it
never
before.
talked about it on this podcast. Nope. It's a total secret that everyone was keeping from me.
It is true that we could do like a whole episode on just roguelike games, because they're so popular right now. They're going I feel like so many games are roguelike, and everyone uses the word, and we briefly, we did mention it briefly. We could go in depth. We should play some like of the OG Rogue.
Yeah.
Like give it a shot and then compare it. Ooh, okay. I'm writing that one down on the topic list. Anyway, tell us more about this roguelike game.
Imagine making a game that's so influential that everybody else calls it rogue, that the name of your game, like roguelike, Souls-like, because Dark Souls. That's pretty impressive.
Yep. Absolutely.
So what I think that is going to happen is that from now on, podcasts are going to be called Pixel Professor-like.
Obviously.
There's going to be a certain kind of podcast, and it's going to be PP-like. Probably need to work on that a little bit.
Well, yeah.
I heard that when I said it.
After you said it. You want to put it back in your mouth after
you
said it.
Well, I don't want to put it back in my mouth.
Oh, dear. Nope. Oh, man. Well, good start. Good start to this one. Oh, dear.
So roguelikes.
Speaking of...
roguelikes are awesome.
They are. Yeah, they really are.
Basically, the whole point of a roguelike is that you die.
Yes.
A bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
You play through it, and then you die. And then as you play through it, you earn different upgrades and different abilities and different spells or wishes or wishes, meaning being the thing that you get when you're Aladdin.
That's right, Aladdin. So the characters in this game, one of the things that makes it unique and fun, like the setup is all just fantasy characters, not Grimm's Brothers. No, I was going to say Grimm Brothers, but it's not all just Grimm's Brothers. It's like, but there is. I like playing the Pied Piper, and Beowulf is in it, and Aladdin, and Little Mermaid, and Little Red Riding Hood, Ice Queen. Like there's all kinds of
Geppetto.
Yes, and it's fun because you throw them in these chapters. Right, and the chapters are all based on, like, they're a chapter from maybe that character's book. So I think chapter 1, is chapter 1 the Pied Piper? No. Yes? Maybe?
Yeah, I think it is.
And then chapter 2, I think, is Beowulf. And we just unlocked, I think, chapter 3, right? Is chapter 3 out yet, though? Like, we unlocked it, but we can't play it yet. Is that right?
Actually, I think it is out as of today.
Ooh.
It came out today. I'm actually right now downloading the update.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can have to put that tonight. So, what is it called again? I always call it Ravenclaw. It's Raven's Watch. Watch.
Yep.
Yeah. So playing Raven's Watch, and you're still playing Helldivers.
Still playing Helldivers. That's such a fun co-op game. So much fun to go and play with other people. I did have an issue that you will not understand. It was last Thursday, and I played for about an hour, and my game crashed 3 times. And it was so annoying. And so then I validated my files, which you sometimes have to do with Steam, and then it was fine. But I was like, man, if this is how Erock has to live his life, man.
It really is just in that game. Like, I've tried so many others that are pretty taxing on my video card, but that game likes to crash. Wild. And apparently, based on the old Reddits, the Reddit chats and stuff and forums, I am not the only one for whom Helldivers 2 crashes a lot. So
sometimes
there is a new update.
You just need to tell your files that they're good at what they do and that they're fine. You just got to validate them.
Validate those files. Just, hey, guys, it's like plants.
Yep.
to grow. So for the files to be successful, they need to feel good. Don't we all?
I insult my plants, and that makes them grow to overcome the obstacles.
I see. You're making them strong and helping them grow.
Yeah. Hey,
With my
dummy.
kids too. That's what I do. They
Yeah.
dumb kids. Yeah, they love it. They love
Yeah.
it.
What are you playing?
What am I playing? I'm playing, Ravens Watch. I keep calling it the wrong thing, Ravens Watch. Playing that, which has been fun. I'm getting back on the Fallout train ever since the show. I'm just back in it. So I was playing Fallout 4 some. I've never completed everything. I've never been much of the whole like completionist thing where you're trying to do every single little task. That's a little overwhelming for me. But I think I'm going to try it. I just have pure vanilla Fallout 4 and not even any of the DLC to start, just because I want to like just be able to focus on what feels a little bit manageable. And I'm not even paying any attention to the quests or anything. I'm just playing. Like if I see a build, like when you're looking on your map and you're looking at the UI, it's kind of a nice little feature. If you've discovered the location, it's filled in. So like it's the outline, maybe the silhouette of a church, for example. And if you've discovered it, then that silhouette fills in. So as you're looking around on your map, you'll see these like just the outlines of certain locations. So if I see one of those, I'm just going to all of those every time I see one and clearing it out. Basically, they're dungeons. But in this case, they're like old wrecked hospitals and subways and churches and old shops and stuff like that. And there's sometimes you'll discover a fun little hidden story inside of them, or you'll just blow a bunch of super mutant heads off. And either way, it's a good time. So that's what I Fallout 4, and I think those are the two games. I've had a lot of time for mini games this last week, so that's been the ones, I think.
I saw some news articles about Fallout being, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like a gajillion new downloads because of it ever since the Amazon show launched.
Well, they're even releasing a new update for it this week, like with new texture packs and stuff, just to like make it more updated for next generation PCs. So, man, the impact of that show on the series is probably worth actually having a discussion about eventually on here. Just we should do a whole thing on just video game adaptations for TV series and such, particularly since I think we're in a really good sort of golden age of that. Like there are some bad ones, especially in the 90s and stuff. Mario Brothers. Did we talk about it last time? Maybe we talked about it last time, but oof, that was bad. But right now, with all the ones that are out right now, it's so good. Hey, where's the thing?
Not a bad idea.
I'm gonna write that one down too. Video game adaptation.
So Fallout 4 is the one that's getting all the.
Fallout 4 is the one that that's the last one.
What was 76?
So 76 is the multiplayer one
version of Fallout 4.
Just the Fallout. Fallout 76 it's set in a new location. Fallout 4 is in Boston, and Fallout 76 is set in West Virginia. And
so is Fallout 76 the most recent or the second most recent?
Most recent, yeah. Fallout 76 is the most recent, but the most recent of the sort of traditional, it's just you in the open world, is Fallout 4.
Fallout 4.
But that being said, I think they updated. Fallout 3 was the one that moved similar to, I'd say, Oblivion, maybe. Fallout 3 is around the same time moved into the new Bethesda thing. And a lot of the same people who worked on Oblivion and such were in Fallout 3. And so a lot of people love... Fallout 3 was really good. Like, good voice acting, cool story. That was my gateway drug into Fallout, was Fallout 3. It was really great. So
that makes me want to excuse me.
You're emotional though.
Yeah, it makes me choke up a little bit.
Yeah.
That makes me want to learn more about Skyrim. If only I could learn, if there was a place or somebody.
I don't think.
Maybe we could put out a call. Instagram.
I just looked on my tabs, and I've got a thing. Let's see what this is. Let's just see what this thing is. Let me share the screen here. And what a coincidence. Let's see. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, wait. What is this? What is that? That's just. Wow, I really genuinely don't know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. There. Hey. It looks like the Pixel Professor breakdown of Skyrim Part 3. We should do that then, maybe. We should try that. We should do that.
Let's give it a try.
Give it a whirl. So, all right, I'm not going to do a ton of review. Please go back and watch part 1 and 2, especially to get I'm
busy right now doing a podcast.
Good. We'll do this and then go back and watch those two for sure.
Just want to set expectations realistic.
Yes, you certainly do that every week, so that's good. So framework for analysis. This is what we talked about, and this is again, I'd love feedback on this. I did think about this a ton, and the more I think about it, I'm getting kind of excited about it, which means there's probably a lot wrong with it. So it needs to. So please poke holes in it.
So start over.
As you can see, if you're watching us instead of listening, if you're listening, I'll tell you. So we've got the first part of the framework for the analysis is analyzing the presentation, right? That's the cinematic aspects of the video game, the visuals, the audio, and everything else. And that's what we spent the last 2 parts on, and could have done many more parts on. Now we're going to dig into the analysis that is specific to video games, and this is where I'm kind of excited. Like the presentation part, I feel like relies on several sort of an analytical frameworks that already exist. These are ones that are based on aspects of flow, of like the basic 18, the models that are already out there, but trying to package them in a slightly more flexible and maybe a slightly more academic way. And we'll see if they work.
So I do have a question. I know
Yes.
this isn't a math podcast.
Yes.
But we have recorded 2 or 3 times just to get through number 1.
I think 2.
Oh, we've done 1 and 2?
Yes. We recorded 2 last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That makes
yeah.
me feel still math-wise.
Yes.
These
Yes.
last 3 are the ones you're talking about with flow and all that kind of stuff.
Well, so
I don't see a check mark on motivators. That's what's throwing me off.
We haven't done motivators yet. We're starting on motivators today. So the last 4, I should say, are like based on flow and everything else.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So it's going to take us about 16 more weeks is what I'm getting at.
Well, thankfully, I think because these are like a different kind of framework, this
I
is
see.
where I bet you there are people out there that we need to bring onto this show that could take every single one of these aspects and really break them down. But for our purposes, I think we'll go over what these are and move pretty quickly through them, I think. Motivators could take us a little while. Well, so could input. Anyway, all of them could. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We're just going to go with the flow. Flow?
With the flow, I get.
Yeah.
I've been doing some research on social media, so we're going to use a gimmick that they sometimes use. Just wait for number 5. Number 5 will shock you.
Shock you. Like, yes.
Just wait till we get to social elements. It will blow your mind. You'll be like, I gotta like and share and subscribe. This is amazing.
Every social media has to have like some kind of a MacGuffin, right? That keeps you moving through. Yeah, absolutely.
Experts are shocked at number 5.
Yes, experts are shocked. You will
Dentists
change your
can't believe-
religion after.
Dermatologists hate us for revealing number 5.
Oh, number 5's like the most boring of all of them. So anyway, that'll really hook you. We'll just wait until we get to number 5.
Singles in your area can't wait for number 5. Stay tuned.
This is why you are in charge of social media, and why our fans are gonna like love us in the beginning and then hate us because of all the promises that aren't kept. That's really
Where are the
funny.
singles in my area?
So anyway, on that front,
Not that kind of video
not
game.
that kind of video game. So 2 through 5. Number 2, the
Okay.
second aspect of the framework, I'm calling them motivators because I don't know what else to call them, and maybe there's a better, more academic term. But this is what I'm calling the mechanics of the game, the things that actually move you through time, that motivate you through time. Whether it's just, and we'll talk about what this one is specifically, but even like a dice game has some aspect that motivates you to keep playing it or to win it or however you win it. Like, again, it's mechanics and a couple other things. We'll get to there in a second. Input, user interface, like that's specifically how you interact with those motivators and with the presentation. Feedback is how the game interacts with you, like how it tells you whether or not you're being successful or not. And then the social elements, I added this simply because it's a key part of the basic 18. Most game companies are talking about that aspect of games, but it's not quite as organic to the process in every game, at least, especially in a game like this. But I have some, I hope, thought-provoking questions about social elements, so stick around because your thoughts are going to be provoked.
So social elements, you're talking about like multiplayer, community type stuff, or
I think
like,
so. Yeah. Well, I think when you're thinking about elements in a game, in game design, I you're mostly thinking of and considering how, like in a game like Helldivers 2, it's easy to or
hmm,
Raven's Watch, like. But I think other games too are gonna ask key questions about how socially we're going to interact with this game across a variety of people and demographics and stuff like
hmm.
that. So and maybe there are some key questions we're missing in this analysis on social elements that I'd love some thoughts and ideas on. So these are the two main motivators that I'm thinking of as we dig into this part of the analysis. One is the narrative motivator, and every game has either, I'd say every game, at least every video game, has some narrative aspect, even if it's, oh goodness, like anti-narrative. Like it's like specifically, it's addressing narrative in some way or another. Like how you interact with it is almost always is maybe a better way to put that, there's some kind of motivating narrative factor in the game, even if that's mentioned in the beginning and then thrown away. And then the actual mechanics of the games are designed to be fun and to motivate you to keep playing them. And the mechanics of each individual game, like a roguelike game, there are specific mechanics to every single game. So, first starting in terms of motivators with the narrative elements, this narratively, is that an adverb? I just made it one. Narratively.
Should be.
It should be if it isn't. Now it is. Webster, pay attention to Pixel Professor Buggeth. So narrative elements. There's high fantasy and low fantasy, and I got to learn a little bit about this. Like high fantasy is essentially where the world of the game is not ours, right? Whereas low fantasy, it tends to be hours. If I believe I've got that definition right. So Skyrim is a high fantasy game. This is not a definition that I invented. I actually should be giving credit to the person who invented the term high fantasy, and I'm not. So I'll put it in the show notes because I can't remember his name. It's not a particularly old term, but is used to refer to all kinds of things like Lord of the Rings exists in a different world. It might have connections to our world, and you might be able to infer some of those things, but essentially, Tamriel, the world of Skyrim, right, exists somewhere else. So this is high fantasy.
So low fantasy might be Harry Potter.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Cool.
Or what's
or Fallout?
Fallout.
Because it's in real life, although it's not
That must
really
be.
fantasy.
Yes, no, but I think that must be. Yeah, I think usually that would be referred to as science fiction, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true.
But maybe there's elements like some of these lines are certainly blurred, like Star Wars, for example, which usually isn't referred to as science fiction, but as science fantasy. So that's sort of a crossover because there are wizards and magic, and it's not intended to be real, even though we all know that it is real. It was the way things were in a galaxy far, far away and a long time ago. So
can't tell me it wasn't.
Exactly. You have no proof. So next aspect. So anyway, high fantasy. There is a specific hero in these games, and not every game has like a specific hero or anti-hero. Sometimes a group. RPGs thrive on a party, right, and different groups without necessarily a key specific hero. But this concept of the hero, we're going to talk a little bit about how this challenges certain filmic aspects, like in terms of whether or not the hero still exists in cinema and in film in general. But the hero, the idea of the hero's journey. You've heard of Joseph Campbell, yes? Joseph Campbell was the one who theorized that there was sort of a monomyth, that every culture has its mythology, and in almost every case you can find these connective tissues and threads between any culture's mythology, that they kind of come together. And Joseph Campbell was one who deeply influenced George Lucas in the creation of Star Wars in terms of like this actual hero's journey. And now almost any writer of any film ever uses aspects of sort of the actual monomythic structure in their writing. Like there has to be You know, the you start in your real world, the normal world, and then you have some kind of call to action, right? And we could do a whole podcast on this. And I love dissecting the hero's journey. I've read every Joseph Campbell thing I get my hands on. It's just really, really fascinating, and it's so relevant, and it's so human. We as humans love to tell stories, and I've been using mythology as a way to teach and to warn for thousands and thousands of years, well before we could write it down. But there's a hero. Again, they're in their real world. They're called to action. They refuse it. There's some kind of an event that stirs up their real world, so they have to go out onto this journey, whether it's going to somewhere like dropping a ring into Mount Doom, or going out and fighting Darth Vader, or whatever it is. There's some call to action, and you come back to that world changed in some way. So it's, the idea is, as we as humans go through similar journeys, and it's important to leave your safety, the safety of your normal world, to grow and to become something greater and bigger, because society needs you to survive. This has come out of the evolution of humanity. Like, we need to progress. And Skyrim and Bethesda in general really doubles down on this hero's journey. The unique thing is how we get to interact with the world and actually make choices. Hailing back to things like, did you ever read any choose your own adventure novels? Did you read those?
Oh yeah.
Did you
definitely.
cheat?
I definitely remember keeping my finger
Yes, that's
in
cheating.
the back,
Yes.
in like at the beginning part, and then like flipping forward and being like, nope, don't like that. Okay, let's go this way.
So you did cheat. I felt so guilty based on how I experienced the world growing up. If even cheating in a choose your own adventure book, like I remember the one time that I did it, and I felt so bad I couldn't read that book anymore. Like, because the whole point, if you've never read a choose your own adventure book, they're a lot of fun. They were huge in the 80s. I don't know if they were still huge in the 90s, but when I was a kid, they were huge, and probably before then as well. And I don't know the history of them per se. But that being said, you read along, and you come to these, like, you come to a fork in the road. It'll say, turn to page 11 if you turn right, turn to page 45 if you turn left. And the choices are way more compelling than that. And there's science fiction, and there's fantasy, and there's like true crime, and people go crazy with these choose your own adventure books, and I loved them. And so there's still an aspect of controlling the narrative. You have a limited number of choices, but that being said, you still have an actual variety of endings that are possible, right? As opposed to just, I read this book and it starts here and it ends here, which is really, really cool. So
I want to read You Are a Shark. That one looks awesome.
You are the only one you can really see in that image, right? Or Mountain Survival is in there. I had a couple Star Wars choose your own adventure books growing up that I loved.
It's pretty close to Gesamtkunstwerk.
It sure is. As long as if it involves Star Wars, it is Gesamtkunstwerk. I think I have one on the anyway. Anyway, good versus evil. Here's one of the coolest things about this switch that happens in the 2000s with The Sims, is not only do you get to choose your own adventure in these games, which isn't necessarily brand new, you can play the game however you want. Now in games, and Bethesda does this a lot, there's a whole alignment system, right? Not only you have the option to choose good or evil. I don't know if you played any of these games. So The Sims, you could choose to be a kind, neighborly person, either by the way you played it or the traits that you set up for your Sim. So they could choose to be good or bad, and then you get to sort of vicariously live your life as a real jerk if you're a nice person. I've always felt way too guilty to ever experience. Like, I tried to play several of these games as a villain, and I can never make it. Do you do it? Can you play as a villain in a game? Can you do it?
I don't even feel I'm not even allowed to play those games.
Oh man. So you weren't allowed to play The Sims? Black and White was particularly fun. Did you ever play Black and White?
No, never
Oh
heard
my
of it.
goodness. This game was so fun. I don't know how it would still play, but you are a god. And basically you get to play with these followers and influence whether or not you're a good god or a bad god. Like, so you can I feel the guilt still. You can pick up a character and just throw it. And you could like throw it miles and it dies. I did that once to one of my followers. I was like, "What happens when you flick it with the?" And I threw it. I had no idea you could, and watched him fly and then die this horrible death. And I sat there and just I don't know if I can play this game anymore. So anyway, you can be a good deity or a bad deity in this black and white game.
Fascinating.
Oh,
We need to do a playthrough of that game.
Oh, I don't know. I still feel I have so many feelings. I have to try it again. But Fable, did you ever play Fable?
Nope.
Whole series of games. Oh man, Fable was particularly popular in terms of its ability to allow you to choose to be good or bad. Like you could be truly evil or truly good, and it was kind of very black and white, one or the other. And that's one of the things that Bethesda explores in some really unique, cool ways. Knights of the Old Republic. You ever played Knights of the Old? Please tell me you played Knights of the Old Republic. Oh my gosh, Swift! This game is wonderful, and I'm a Star Wars fan, which means we have to play. I don't think you can play it multiplayer, which is should you have there's a whole party system, and you can choose to basically be on the dark side or the light side. You can choose to do one of
that. That does sound pretty cool.
Oh, it's so good. They've recently been like you can even get them on like your iPad. I have them both on my. There are two games, two of them, 1 and 2, and I said we play 1 and 2, and they're both just two of my favorite games of all time. They're set like old Republic, like long. I think it's like 10,000 years before the Battle of Yavin or however they do that. So anyway, all these games, what they allow you to do is not just play like this. You're not just a standard issue hero out to do what is right, following a narrative, and we're gonna talk more about that here soon. But actually, it reminds me. So one of my really close friends and I used to play Star Wars Galaxies. It was an old MMO that I think we talked about it a little bit. But the main thing was I couldn't even stomach the idea of playing as a Sith, and that's all he wanted to do. Like he couldn't play on the light side. I remember one day like having this like moral dilemma and sitting down and he even playing together, he was in different circles than me because he became a Sith, and he was actually admired in the game because it was so hard to do. And I was working my way to becoming a Jedi, and we were setting up to have this epic battle one day with each other because we were friends. And then it's just like Anakin and Obi-Wan or something like that.
Oh, that's way cool.
It was so cool. But I remember once going, how can you play as a Sith? Like, how do you square that? Like, I was genuinely like, how do you square that morally to play as a Sith? And he put his arm on my shoulder and he said, Eric, it's just a game. I was like, I know, but you're like living in the Star Wars. You have a chance to be a Jedi. And he's like, Jedi are cool. Look at the Sith. Look at how they dress. Look at their eyes. Like their lightsabers are cooler. Their stories are cooler. They're like passionate, like aggressive and fun. And I was like, I can't. You're right. The Jedi are so much more boring than the Sith, but I can't. I have to be good. I just have to be good. Anyway, so the ability to do that is now present in games,
yep.
Just these alignment things. So you get to play the hero's journey, but not just in that sort of cliche, exactly how it's supposed to be played. So this is a question I kind of want to have sitting there because we're going to apply this question to Skyrim. I'd love your thoughts on it. So in teaching the Hearing the Movies class, we talk about a shift in the early 2000s away from the standard issue Luke Skywalker style, Indiana Jones style, like the hero that you can just always trust. And maybe he has like every hero has a key flaw, right? Whether it's pride or I don't know. It's usually something sort of innocent-ish, but it's something that they have to overcome. And you expect the hero
to flick their followers thousands of miles.
That's a good point, and probably not the ideal here of fatal flaw. Fatal for that little follower too, I tell you what. But the idea is the hero changes, right? And you can actually see it in Captain America, like the early Captain, and even in the change of movies. So when you look at Captain America set in World War II, he is the old school, all good, all the time hero. And then as soon as you put him in the 2000s, he changes character, right? The flaws become more evident. And now the flaws of our heroes are a lot deeper. Not only that, and maybe it's even better to say it's the loss of the villain. Like most of the way we look at villains is not as black and white. Not typically. Star Wars holds on to that, but in some ways that's what makes Star Wars more awkward in the 21st century in terms of how it interacts, because Star Wars was designed to be this clearly delineated good and bad. And if anything, Anakin helps. Like, oh, we get to actually see both sides of Anakin on this journey that he's on. But like, I think about movies like Maleficent, right? Like, it wasn't enough just to say Maleficent was evil, she was horrible, she turns into dragons, and she tries to kill our hero. Then in the 2000s, we say, no, there's a reason why she is the way she is. And it has something to do with society. Or that whole loss of the villain, loss of the hero is evident in the 2000s. And the way we create characters and write for them is completely different. And video games, chicken or the egg, either video games helped nudge that in those directions because you can... The way you choose isn't so black and white, and goodness gracious, Bethesda is so good at this, at setting up these situations where there is not a clear moral right or wrong answer, which in many ways is so much more human. Right? Now we have such a global understanding of humans, and it's very rare for a human to act out of pure evil. They're doing what they think is good. Right? And that their idea of good is going to clash against my idea of good. And that's what creates these situations. So Bethesda and these alignment systems double down on this sort of loss of the traditional hero idea. Any initial thoughts on that? Like any, or we can just keep moving through.
I mean, it just really fast. It does remind me of Helldivers, where you are definitely playing as the villain.
Yes.
We are part of a fascist, genocidal, crazy super Earth, intergalactic force that goes around and harvests other species for their and turn them into like fuel for our vessels.
Yeah,
and destroy. I mean, civilizations. But we're definitely. I wonder if we're kind of coming back around, and we've now humanized the villains, and now we just are the villains.
It does feel that way in the world, right? There is certainly, my goodness, there's just a lack of clarity in terms of what is right and what is wrong. And I remember back in the 80s, it seemed so clear to everybody. The us versus them. And it was so easy because of the internet. Before it was a thing, it was so easy to control the flow of information. It was easy to be convinced that I was one of the good guys and they were the bad guys. Now you just can't control that flow of information anymore, and everything's changed. And video games either reflect that, or were part of the creation of that, or a combination of both of those things. Either way, I don't think anything quite reflects this loss of the traditional hero more than the art that is created to give us choice. And it was very clear early on that once we give choice, we've got to allow you to make some wrong choices or some morally ambivalent ones at least. And man, Bethesda does that super well. So anyway, as another aspect of this, moving this forward, and role-playing games had already been doing this. The issue is whether or not you could do it in a game. And now looking at how much time we've taken, I love this discussion. This may take more than just today's episode, but because there's some cool stuff that we're about to get to. So have you haven't played a whole lot of D&D, right?
Not a whole lot, no.
Any other role-playing games? And you weren't allowed.
Well, I mean, I had standards. It wasn't really so much that I had.
I did not. Actually, no, I wasn't allowed to play it either. I played it one time, and it was found out that I played it. And you can.
Sorry.
Oh, you can be the bad guy, and you can also be influenced to become to go into dark magic and Satan worship and all that stuff, right? Isn't that
in real life?
Because that's what happens to everybody who plays D&D. They're all a bunch of Satan worshippers. Sorry, guys.
You play Rainbow Six Siege, and you.
Satan worship.
You start to become a violent marine. You play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
You watch Jeopardy, and you become a question asking machine.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
You just become whatever media you consume.
If you watch it, then Yep, that's the message of Pixel Professor podcast. If you consume it, you're doomed to become it. Ooh, that kind of sounds wise, though. Ugh. Anyway, okay, well, we should probably ignore that and come back to it later because
Just
there's a little deeper than we want than we want to go to right now. But Dungeons and Dragons, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this whole role playing system. Essentially, you have either a really highly scripted story or a dungeon master who creates their own story. You take a character sheet and you create your own character, and there's certain sort of standard qualities that you have, whether it's dexterity and strength and all of that, and you build this character. You have a certain budget of points that you can apply to these different characteristics, so you might be super charismatic or super strong depending on your role in the you are both
in the game. I see what you're saying.
I see. No, you are that's why you didn't have to play, because you've already maxed out your character. Why play as a lesser being?
Not as fun.
No, not as fun. Absolutely. You'd be flicking your followers across you should never play that game. And it's I loved thinking about D&D very much relies on what you referred to several episodes ago, but this illusory effect. Like everyone buys into the dungeon master creates this world. Dungeons and Dragons itself standardized a lot of rules and systems and monsters in particular. There's a whole book of monsters. It's really fun to just sort of flip through. The art is incredible, and like different monsters have different strengths and weaknesses. And then you go out into the world, and the dungeon master's job is to sort of create flow in this process, right? So you're fighting lower level monsters and building up to stronger and stronger ones. But one of the things, this is gonna all sort of circle around this idea of this ability to make choice. There's in the dungeon master world, I'm gonna say there's sort of two guiding, or sort of the two competing philosophies. One is the completely sort of open world philosophy that says, I'm going to design and create all these different dungeons and worlds and bosses and make a big old map, and then have some roaming creatures and things like that, and then that's it. I'm not going to try to control your fun. I can't do that. You're going to interact with this amazing world that I've made, and I'm not going to have any influence on you. I'm not going to try to guide you in one direction or the other. And then there's the dungeon master who really wants to tell a story. And inevitably, to do that, they have to influence your choices, right? When you come up to a monster, they're going to say, hey, you maybe should really... Or they really sort of heavily weigh, like, your character, if they go this direction, will most certainly meet utter destruction. If they go this direction, then you have a chance. You know what I mean? So they'll really heavily manipulate the game, and that is a real battle in terms of and a real topic of debate amongst people who want to become a dungeon master. A lot of, for example, I know several future fantasy writers or current fantasy writers, people who want to write in that genre, that want to use Dungeons and Dragons as a world in which they can explore their ability to write fantasy. Those are the people who usually pretty heavily script your story. And it's true, a lot of the times they can lead you on a whole arc, right? You'll go into that, and they can. Oops, I just nudged my microphone. Smart. They can lead you in this. They can time everything in a way where you go through the entire hero's journey, and peak at just the right time, and then by the end you're all sort of, you've had this epic journey, and you can throw a big old twist in there at the end, and it can be really rewarding and exciting, but you had less control. On the other side, there's so much more opportunity for interaction and choice, but sometimes your ability to control the narrative is as a dungeon master is less powerful, is less accessible to you. Anyway, does that make sense? Those two competing philosophies.
Yeah. Kind of like a narrative-based game versus an open-world game.
Yes, and when you make an open-world game, you have to decide how open it's going to be. And this became a topic of discussion early on in the creation of Skyrim, and even maybe led some of its initial creators to leave the company because of who ended up winning out in that discussion. That being said, I don't think it's as cut and dry as they say that it is. So we'll talk about that. So that question of the computer as dungeon master, essentially when you make a role-playing style game, whether it's Fallout or any so many of these games have RPG elements, right? I'd say it's rare to have a game nowadays, even a simple puzzle game, that doesn't have some kind of, you create a character, that creator gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and you continue to interact with the world with new tools and items. And almost all of them have to have something. This is how much this role-playing game mechanic. And we should also say, in terms of gaming mechanics, the way you interact with the world and the way you, whether it's fighting a battle or even trying to buy something, there's almost always some kind of dice involved, and that dice is affected by your characteristics. So if you're super strong and you go to do a feat of strength, then you'll have more dice with higher numbers on them. So when you roll against another creature who also rolls at the same time, and you need to get higher than them, the chances of rolling higher go way up the stronger you are, right? But if you're that same character and you're not charismatic, and the thing you're going to do is try to persuade someone to do something for you, whether it's sell you something or join your party, and they're more charismatic than you, then their dice roll is going to be higher than yours, right? That sort of mechanic is also alive and well in these Bethesda game, and most role-playing games have some kind of dice throwing mechanic that's happening behind the scenes. You don't see the dice roll, but even when you like click your button to shoot your gun, there are mechanics behind that. There's an actual, like, well, how good is your aiming? How good are you with energy weapons if you're playing Fallout versus, ballistic weapons? Those kinds of things have an impact on how well you do with that gun. So it's not just how well I point this, though that impacts the game. It's also how good you are at the thing. So those are part of the motivators that keep you going. I want my stats to go up so I continue to play and level up, and et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk a little bit about these narrative elements and these game mechanics. So Julian Lefay, who now goes by Julian Jensen, I believe, he's often called the father of the Elder Scrolls, or the father of Tamriel. He was the guy who created Tamriel for Elder Scrolls 1. He's also one of those sort of controversial figures. We won't go into all of that, but basically in the beginning of the Elder Scrolls 3 of Morrowind, he could see that Bethesda was going in a direction he wasn't interested in and left. And he'll talk a little bit about this in an interview I'm about to show with him. He doesn't like the title of Father of Elder Scrolls. He feels like it was a whole team of people, and basically they were all people who played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and played a lot of tabletop games and decided, hey, we should make a game that is this. And these were the guys specifically who were told, you can't just jump into this world of making a role-playing game in the computer video game world. And they were like, well, bet. And they did it. And of course now it's maybe the most successful video game franchise of all time. So he did have this quote that I love. Originality is nothing. It means nothing. What you need to do is not an original game. You need to do a good game. People like vanilla. I think that was an interesting concept. I think a lot of game designers go into it saying originality is everything, and he was saying no, that's a bonus. It shouldn't be what you go in the creation of the game to do. Go into it to make a good game. Let the rest of the chips fall as they may. So what I want to show is just a little bit of, he did this really great interview. He kind of went into hiding. He was a hard guy to find, and mostly I think he was just trying to make a living. When he started doing this in the early days, they weren't making a ton of money. And unfortunately for him, he left the Elder Scrolls before he would have made a lot of money. And now the Elder Scrolls are a multi-billion-dollar industry. And of course, I could only imagine their earnings now after the Fallout success of the Fallout series. They're doing so well. And he left before any of that. And there's no royalties or anything coming his way. It's kind of a shame. But in this interview, he's asked a question that goes along these ideas, this idea of this narrative interaction with the game.
Right, is it one thing that resonated with me and many fans of the early Elder Scrolls games was its distinct atmosphere, scope, and sense of discovery. What was your secret in creating a world that seemed to live, breathe, and go on with or without you?
The computer should be my DM. That should be as good as your dungeon master. Even when you're not playing, is thinking about it. And when you shouldn't take a right turn, when you're playing for the left, he can still figure it out, right? He adapts to it. And it's the whole idea is the computer should be a dungeon master, right? That's I think the biggest difference between Todd and myself, Todd Howard, who's
right, Todd Howard.
And now Todd has done a great job, obviously, right? I mean, the series is a huge success. Todd is a very talented guy and a super nice guy as well. I very much like Todd, and can't say that he's done anything other than really well for the franchise. That being said, the game he's making is not the game I would have made. Right, he's
Definitely.
much more about scripting stuff out and designing things and setting things up, and although they're not linear stories at all, they are sort of very limited. It's getting better as the franchise is growing and you have more money and resources. But especially in the beginning, that was like when he was doing Redguard, which is sort of his first Elder Scrolls thing. It was it was just not because to me that's not what a dungeon master does. Well, it's what a bad dungeon master does. No, you have to go here. No, I know you want to turn right, but you got to turn left because that's what I planned. You got to go here. I mean, that's not how a good dungeon master is, and that's not what Elder Scrolls should be in my mind. However, that is my idea, and obviously his idea is working very well. So,
I mean,
So, according to Julian Lefay or Jensen, he's saying that they're now overly scripting, more heavily scripting Dungeons or Elder Scrolls more than he would have. He would have erred more on the fully open world side, giving you complete control and not trying to govern your direction. What's interesting, as we hear from some of these other creators, I think they were thinking more the way he suggests. Now, I want to look at them before we have more of a discussion on this. I do want to introduce some of the other creators. There is an attempt to script a lot of things, but also very much an attempt to make that a feature of the open world, not to force you in one direction or the other. And so we'll talk about whether or not they achieve that balance. And this is where, when we do get you to play this game, which I'm really excited to do, I really want to know what you think about this, because this will be a key subject of analysis when we look at any of these role-playing games. Like, how well do they do with this, especially these open world role-playing games? I think where you fall on this really determines whether or not someone's able to get into flow. Because I won't give you my opinion yet, because I think I have my opinion about it on a tabletop, and I have my opinion on it in a video game, and they're a little bit different. But I'd love your thoughts on this too. You coming at it from maybe a little less experience in this world too. So just a little bit. We already talked about these creators, Todd Howard and them, in terms of starting on Daggerfall. He suggests from a narrative perspective one of the reasons why, in particular with Oblivion and Morrowind, the genre exploded and the Elder Scrolls exploded, was because Lord of the Rings was also popular at the same time. And he talks a lot about main quests versus side quests and how important they both are. So let's just continue. Sort of one of the things I wanted to look at here. These are three of the main creators on Skyrim. Jonah Loeb. I'm gonna say his name wrong. I think it's John Simonet. I think he has a French background. And then Nate Perkypile, which might be my favorite last name of all time. They have different responsibilities. I highly recommend watching if you're interested in the behind the scenes kind of stuff, which I just absolutely love. This video I think it's about an hour long. Is Jonah Loeb, who doesn't work for Bethesda anymore. But during COVID, he brought a lot of the creators together, and they did this sort of behind-the-scenes discussion from a lot of those creators. I learned a ton about the game, watching and learning from them. But he talks to them specifically about this. Now, so we'll watch this little interview that Jonah Loeb did. I have a slight disclaimer. One of the models behind Jonah Loeb, I believe it's a 3D model of one of the creatures in Skyrim, briefly appears, and the model is nude. It's just a plastic model in the back, but I don't know. Maybe you need to put an explicit tag on this episode because of this nude elf orc thing behind him. But just, you've been warned. If you don't want to watch it, you can just listen. But anyway, so here's him and these other two creators discussing specifically this narrative game mechanic intersection. Theoretically, if it... I should push the right button on the right screen.
Swing the opposite of that, where you'll see it in the maps on some games now, where you open it up and it's like, you have found 3 out of 5 secrets. Like,
you know what it did? This darn thing. Ignore all of this. Ignore all this. Oh, whoa. I'm having fun here. It started in the wrong place. Let me see if it starts in the right place
I was
now.
just thinking, when I think about how things were laid out, I think about like someone like Joel's work, where the way he like thinks about laying out landscapes. So you see a thing in the distance, and you like walk towards it, even though it looks like a straight shot. You have like 7 different adventures on the way there.
Well, Bethesda games in general, to be honest, right? Like it's that kind of defines most of them, which is, you have that one objective where you think you do, but along the way, so much crap happens.
This, of course, is the quintessential Skyrim experience. You see something in the distance, you head for it, and then 10 hours later, you haven't even gotten there because you got distracted. Have you ever played just the main quest of Skyrim? I made the last boss of Skyrim, Alduin, and the Whalebone Bridge that you cross to reach him, but I've never actually seen them in-game. Why? I just never got there. I was too distracted. There is hidden treasure all over Skyrim, but nobody's going to show you the way. You have to find it for yourself.
There's a Harvey Smith, who's the creative director from like Deus Ex and Dishonored. Harvey has this this quote that I'm sure I'll screw up here, but it's like, side content is meaningful because you can miss it, right? Like when you find something that you could have easily missed, it makes the discovery yours. It is not the game saying, I spent time on this, please acknowledge it, right? The player's discovery, the player's sense of authorship of her own experience is more important than our sense of authorship of her experience.
Having that sense that there are actually secrets are a good part of like the feel of that game, because there's other games that swing the opposite of that, where you'll see it in the maps on some games now, where you open it up and it's like, you have found 3 out of 5 secrets. Like, yo, that's not a secret. You told me. I think you need to look up the definition of that word. And for me, that just like ruins it, because then it makes it a collection. Like it just saps that emotion out for me.
Okay, so there's their thoughts on whether or not Skyrim itself, as I said, their objective was to design a game that wasn't too heavily scripted, and yet that is the criticism that is being leveled at them from early creators of the game. So this is sort of an open question. I'm also realizing time-wise, there's no way I'm getting as far in this as I thought we were, because we still have so much more to cover, and I kind of love that, to be honest. So in your experience, do you have any thoughts on this sort of overly open or more scripted style of game? I'd say, because Helldivers is a good example. That's almost all just sort of open, but it's objective driven. There's not really a story. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. So Helldivers probably doesn't fit into this world. But anyway, any thoughts of overly scripted versus overly open, or do you swing one way more than the other?
I don't know. I think they both have some fun aspects. I mean, one thing that I think is interesting about Helldivers is the fact that there is a DM.
Yes.
And there is the guy named Joel. We've talked about Joel before, and he makes decisions, and this past week he made, like, there was a new order, a new quest, and the quest was basically impossible, and what the community did is going to influence what happens next. Like if we defend planets on the bug front, then the bots are going to be more, they're going to invade and get farther. And if we succeed more on the bot front, then the bugs are going to be, and that's going to kind of change the story.
That's stressful.
But it's a different, yeah. I don't know. I love being able to just go in Minecraft and just kind of mess around.
Yes.
And there's no story. There's not really, I mean, there's a narrative in the sense that there is time progressing and things happen, but you can just build a house and then you get tired and then you build the Starship Enterprise and then, you build just a smiley face and then.
Yeah.
But then I also love leveling up a character and building up points and getting good at archery in some game, and then being able to play with friends and be the archer and be able to help them out. I don't know. What about you? Which do you kind of lean toward?
See, I don't know. I will say I think Bethesda does split this difference in an extremely elegant way. And I might even make the case that their ability to split that difference is so successful that that is why they are what they are. Because of their, I think a lot of different gaming companies, and maybe it's not a lot yet, but have tried the open world thing. And from a flow perspective, you're trying to balance challenge and ability, right? And if it's so open world that you just kind of get plopped out into the space and said, and the direction is just, well, go, just explore. I find that to get pretty overwhelming pretty fast because you often go the wrong way, or maybe like when there's no directive over where to go or how to get there, or the objective's not strong enough, or the motivator itself is not motivating enough, then I find myself getting like that. I heard it once said that you can feel lots of things in a video game, whether it's overly challenged or, you know, you can really make life pretty miserable for a gamer and they'll still keep coming back if you get the mechanics right. The number one thing you can't feel as a gamer is lost. Once a gamer feels lost, they usually turn it off. And I think that goes back to flow. Once a gamer is taken out of flow because it's so challenging or there's no clear direction about what's next, then you quit. So I think Julien Lefay's idea is a romantic one about it being just completely open world. Like, and I will admit, as the few times that I've been a DM myself, which I do enjoy world building and creating myself, I don't think I'm particularly good at it, but I do enjoy it. I love just creating a big old massive world, giving them an initial thing that introduces them to it, and then letting them go. And really not directing them whatsoever. I want them to be able to make almost any choice that they want. I can do that in a fictional world in our heads. I don't think you can do that in a video game. I don't think that notion that Julien has that you can just unleash someone on the world, I think only works if you can actually do anything in that world. And there are limitations. You know, video games have their limitations, and they probably should. And some of my most exciting experiences in games like Skyrim have been on both sides of that spectrum, even being allowed to just see that mountain off in the distance and say, I'm going to go there. And then going there. And of course, as they said, getting distracted on the way by all the tasks and things that you see. And other times just being like, I want to move this story forward. I want to see what happens to this character that I now feel an attachment to. So I personally think Bethesda splits that difference in a really incredible way that is super hard to do. And that might be one of its greatest strengths. And I'll be curious to see how you feel about that when you play it. But it just keeps you hooked, regardless of your level. And it does it by balancing those two features. So, I don't know. I think that's the thing. That you have this illusion of this ability to do almost anything that you want. But they manipulate you into wanting to continue the story. So, it's fun. I think that's the way. Anyway, any more thoughts on that?
That's way cool. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a key part of our analysis moving forward.
Yeah.
So, on that front, here's the main question. Oh my goodness. So here's the thing. I know, you know what? I think we're going to try this. I think we're going to keep going. Can we keep going? This might take a little bit longer, but I think that the rest of this stuff, I don't think is compelling enough on its own to be its own episode, but I think it's ridiculously fascinating in this context of the motivators and the game mechanics. So we're going to keep going here really quickly, and I might skip one of the videos that we have just because it's less interesting than the other. But
remember, just wait for number 5.
Just wait.
Just wait.
You're gonna
make sure that you. Yeah,
your mind's going to be so completely blown, you may pass out, or something. Was that the way? I don't think I did that right. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So the next thing is a feature of a game that either works or doesn't, and you've all felt both, I'm sure, if you played any games ever. And this is this input UI thing, is how do I interact with the game itself? This has to do with controls and the instant reaction of those controls on the screen in a simple way. So I do want to, I think this is really, really interesting. Do we show this? This is the history, a brief history on the actual sort of the way we interact with games in general. And this guy Wolfden did on his YouTube channel, did just sort of the whole history behind why we use W, A, S, and D when we're working in like everything from Minecraft to Bethesda games to whatever else. And I think it's actually quite fascinating. So this to give you an introduction of like input in how we input into a game. Here's a quick thing on that.
First-person shooters genre can be traced all the way back to a game called Maze Wars in 1974, which came out for Mac and all these other weird computer platforms. This game is super primitive and includes none of the controls that we want to talk about. MIDI Maze came out in 1987 for the Atari ST and is a little bit less primitive, but it still only has you moving forward and back and rotating left and right. No strafing or looking up and down or anything like that.
See our conversation on 3D games.
Sort of 3D, you only have control over 2 axes of movement. In 1992, we blasted right into the future of first-person shooters with Wolfenstein 3D for DOS. This pretty much had the same controls as MIDI Maze,
or Chex
but it
Quest.
allowed you to hold Alt as a modifier key for the left and right buttons to strafe. That's right, this game did not use WASD, which you may all know as the default control scheme for movement. This is before the days of WASD, where the obvious choice was, hey, let's just use the arrow keys. 1 year later, we had Doom, which is credited as popularizing the first-person shooter genre. It used basically the same control scheme as Wolfenstein 3D for movement. You'll notice that you can't use the mouse for looking around and aiming. That's because this implementation hasn't even been discovered yet. Doom and Wolfenstein's keyboard-only control schemes were so popular in the early 90s that it spawned a whole genre called Doom clones. Even though Doom is kind of a clone of Wolfenstein, but whatever. At the same time, all of this was happening in 1994. Bungie released their 4th game for the Mac called Marathon. Don't forget, Bungie used to be a Mac developer before it got in bed with Microsoft and then got in bed with Sony. This is the first game to use the mouse to control the character's perspective. We call this a free look rotating camera, or mouse look. But this option wasn't on by default because it wasn't popularized yet, and it was a little clunky. With your right hand holding the mouse, what would your left hand be doing to control the movement? I'll give you a second to guess. That's right. You use the D, C, A, and S keys, of course. Remember, WASD was still not standard for PC
I remember
games.
that.
By default, this game used the
so
number pad
clunky.
to move and the DCAS keys to control movement. No mouse. The first game to have mouse look on by default was Terminator Future Shock in 1995.
Bethesda.
But again, this was not popular. This game also did not have WASD by default. It had W, X, Q, and D? Why D? Why? The first Quake in 1996 was attributed as being a major step in modern PC controls, but not even this defaulted to WASD or mouse look. This used the arrow keys. WASD was popularized by the competitive Quake community, so they were editing their own control
Great
schemes.
game.
In 1997, GoldenEye took the idea of this dual analog control
GoldenEye.
scheme and
Classic.
ran with it. You might remember in my last video how very primitive this was, but this popularized the idea of a free look rotating camera. GoldenEye also used the Z trigger to shoot, which sounds like a no-brainer now, but back then, games didn't have it figured out yet. It is a trigger, after all. A game like Medal of Honor for the PlayStation 1 had you pressing X to fire by default.
Remember it well.
How stupid do you have to be? GoldenEye
He's
also
passionate.
had a
He's
dedicated
passionate.
button to switch weapons and a button to reload. Many games had these buttons already, but not a lot of games had this package. GoldenEye was really the first game to do free look right. Other developers would take this idea and quickly improve on it. Back to the PC, in 1998, Half-Life came out. This is the first game
Half-Life.
to have WASD enabled by default and mouse look. It also had shift to run, space to jump, and E to use. This is the modern control scheme for PC that we're looking for. It's kind of amazing that it came as late as 1998. After this, games started to slowly roll out WASD and mouse look by default. The next year, we had Quake 3 Arena, which finally defaulted to WASD, even though the Quake community was using it years prior. All of this is really important for console controls. It's because of these controls, WASD on the left hand and mouse look on the right hand, that we have dual analog sticks with the left stick controlling movement and the right stick controlling perspective.
There you go. So, there's a quick history of WASD,
Wild.
which I think my wife hates because she really struggles with the whole 3D like moving around with your mouse thing. And I still struggle in general with just controllers and analog sticks doing it because I love the mouse look so much. Do you have a preference, controller or PC? What's your go-to?
I don't know. I think either one, I'd have to figure out how to do it every time.
It's
You know,
learning
like
from
when I
scratch every
switch
time.
between games. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So when you switch, you just have to relearn it each time. You feel like.
Well, like going back and forth between Raven's Watch
Yeah.
and Helldivers, I will. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess because like shift is whatever, run fast, sprint
Almost always.
in one of the games, and but in the other game it's
Mhm.
not, and so
That's the hardest part.
it's kind of game specific.
It's true. And Bethesda, for example, what was the other shooter I was playing? Maybe it was just Helldivers, between Helldivers and Fallout, for example, when the use button, or Minecraft is the one that always throws me at first. Look, the controllers, thankfully the basic mouse look WASD thing is the same in terms of how to move around, but then like interacting with a crafting table and a chest, the way you would do that versus Fallout or something, when you do go back and forth, it's very confusing. So UI and how and having a standardized system, I'm sure these companies are grateful for, because now at least there's at least a level of education you don't have to provide for your audience, for your clientele. That being said, whenever you change anything, I'm sure there are times when programmers are thought, if I could just do this, like maybe I remember when I first started playing, I would always go through and change the S to move back to X, because for whatever reason that it made more sense to me in the beginning that there'd be a little separation between each, because I would hit two of them at the same time, the fat fingers. But now I'm so used to WASD that that's what I have to use. It's what the world uses. Anyway, so as far as the actual controls themselves, even though there's always some education, I would say these Bethesda games, within the Bethesda world, they're all the same. And then in terms of how those compare to other games, they're similar enough that even if there's some learning curve, it's not too bad. The place where there is some learning curve, I won't show this video just because it's a little bit longer. I'll put the link to this in the show notes. The one thing that was maybe criticized the most about Skyrim is the UI, the actual user interface and menu system itself. One of the comments she makes in this video that I love is, I know it's called Elder Scrolls, but come on. Like the thing is, when you interact with this, it attempts to be simplified, but there's a lot of scrolling. Like when you're actually trying to see your items, you just have to kind of flip through item after item after item after item. And the way I always have to remember which button pulls up my inventory. And then there's the commands that are in that space, like in the inventory space and the spell space. And then there's the ones that are in the actual like system save game space. And they're all different menus. They're not in the same location. And again, when you're looking for an item, you can favorite your items, for example, but you have to scroll like crazy to like, I want this sword. And then you have to, what was the first title of it? Was it called Blake's like the sword of infamy, or was it called the infamous sword? And so that means if it's the sword of infamy, I got to go to S. And if it's infamous, I got to go to I. Or did I sort this alphabetically? Anyway, like there's so much scrolling, and it's a really clunky menu. That's where the mod community has really come through. You almost never want to use the vanilla UI in this case. So it is definitely a way that you can be pulled out of flow in this game, which is really a shame because everything else kind of hums along. And that even said, the other Bethesda games do a much better job with their UI than Skyrim does. Fallout, which I'm playing right now, has a much more intuitive system for getting through your different guns and items. All of these games, any RPG, to be honest, and I don't know how you feel about this, often the inventory management systems are what pull me out of flow. Like just trying to, and as we're playing with Mavin, as I'm sure we'll show eventually, this is why he is so particular about where you put things. And if you mess up his sorting system, he loses his mind, which may or may not be a lot of fun to push that button, at least for us. I'm sure he doesn't feel that same way, but I'm going to go ahead and put this flower in the weapons box. And oh my gosh, it's over. it's genuinely over, which is...
You're telling me that sometimes you do that on purpose?
I'm just saying sometimes in terms of like alignment of good and evil, every once in a while you gotta flick that follower across the screen, right? Every once in a while, and you just got to. And maybe I feel less guilt now, and I'm not as good a person as I used to be, but every once in a while.
You have become the bad god, is what you're saying.
Well, and it's for his own good. I mean, that's how you learn patience. Is having someone like me around teaches you patience. Let's be honest. That's just the way it works. That's what I'm here to do.
Put a flower in the weapons box.
That's right.
Works every time.
Flower in the weapons box. So anyway, do you have a game? I didn't ask you this in advance, so this might be, I'll just spring it on me. But can you think of a game that pulls you out of flow instantly because the UI or the interaction with it is so bad? Or on the other side, one that you feel like does that really, really well.
So I love SimCity.
Yes, me too. Me too.
I played Cities Skylines for the first time maybe 2 years ago, and I got maybe half an hour in, so that's not really long enough to learn. But it was too hard to learn all the mechanics and all the instructions, or like all the UI as well.
Yes.
Which that's the whole point of the game. It's a city builder. It's supposed to be complex and kind of convoluted. But I just could not get into it.
Well, especially if so you've played a lot of SimCity, like the other ones. Do you?
I played a lot of SimCity 2000.
Me too. Oh my
That
gosh.
was so much fun.
Yes. Yes, and that is a game that I could spend so long in until it got to the point where it was so complicated and the traffic got so bad that I just started new. I love starting cities. I'm not very good at managing well-created cities, but that's right. Like you've learned some of the keyboard shortcuts and how it moves across the screen and what does what, and then you play a game that looks kind of like it, but the controls are completely different. And incidentally, sometimes they're invented to be completely different because that's the thing that didn't get people into one game but get them into another. That happens all the time, but that is a frustrating part. So I'd say UI and the way you input and interact with the game that you have in front of you is one of the key opportunities, because I think so often that's the part that people can't get over. Like this particular YouTube creator criticizing the game talks about how much she liked to see her character on the screen in the older Elder Scrolls games, but in Skyrim you don't see your character on the screen. And I'm sure they made that as a conscious choice to not see your character because maybe some people didn't like the clutter of seeing your screen. I could just I can put my character in a third person view and I can see them that way, and I can see my armor and my new swords and stuff like that. So anyway, UI is a big deal. I love that example of SimCity versus City Skylines. A big part of gaming literacy is your ability to remember controls and use them quickly and call upon them quickly. That's a big part of esports, right? Playing any kind of like the only people that are going to make it in the highest level of esports are those who have a really incredible hand-eye coordination, and part of that ability to make those choices quickly is to know what button to push in an instant, and sometimes that's lots of buttons. So yeah.
And what was that quote you said about sometimes people can handle difficult, like a thing being hard, but they can't handle being lost?
That's right. Right. Yeah.
I think that's got to be the takeaway for input and UI. Like you can have a hard game, but if you can't navigate the menus well, then I would much rather die 1,000 times because the level's hard than to spend 1,000 minutes looking for my shield.
Oh my gosh. And that's actually really cool. I hadn't even thought about that aspect of UI and input and interaction, but man, that's it. That is one of the spaces where I get lost the most often is in the UI. A badly designed UI can really sink you. And I have seen several games where it was obvious where that was an afterthought, or even worked with people who are working on games or something else, or that aspect is like, oh, that part will take care of itself. And no, you're making some really key decisions. And there are aspects of Skyrim's interface that are quite unique. The way you interact with the map, the way the icons are very clear. There's lots of aspects of the interaction that are very clear and easy to use. But in general, finding things is tedious, sorting things is tedious, and that's where the mod community has really come in. All right, so we've done 3 presentation, motivators, input, and UI. The feedback one is actually really quick. There is one thing I was going to have you do.
Feedback.
Oh, please!
Oh, wasn't
please.
that kind of feedback?
You're always welcome to give me feedback. Do it in the
Good
comments. Oh, thank you.
This is
Thank
awesome.
you. There's more to do, but thank you. We've got to blow people's minds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we haven't even got to 5 yet.
That's right. But the feedback that we're talking about here is how the game interacts with you. So the input UI part is how you interact with the game. The feedback system is how the game comes back and interacts with you. There's an aspect of this that I was going to do that was going to take a while that I'll probably, I really want to do it. We'll do at least part of it. We won't do the whole thing, but we'll see what happens. So
I want to do it.
So there are different tools that a game has for providing you with feedback, whether that's like a narrative element where you unlock something. Like I've unlocked this aspect of the story that I couldn't do. And so the feedback the game gives me that I'm successful is I did this thing and unlocked this. Or because you did it wrong, you're not able to go into a certain space. Like I have to do, like maybe you're trying to pick a lock on a door and you get it wrong or something like that and you can't go in. There are visual ways of giving you feedback, whether it's a cool animation or effect. Like when I get this mushroom, like in Mario Brothers, I grow, and the way that animation helps me, like makes that happen, and looks and sounds, that's cool. And the sound effects is the next one. Like whether it's I still hear that sound in I put that image on there of Mortal Kombat. Finish him! Like when he's kind of sitting there and he's half quasi unconscious, and then you're gonna do some horrible, gross, terrible, violent thing to him. That was one of the greatest. When you getting that finish him meant you had beat him and you got to do some cool combo, and so, and there's all kinds of back to Mario Brothers. If I say to you mushroom, you can hear it. I don't think you're supposed to be able to hear a mushroom, but in the sense of, well, I guess it depends on the kind of mushroom.
After you've eaten it.
That's right. In this case, there's a sound that goes with that. There's a sound that if I say star in Mario Brothers, there's a sound and a song that goes with it, right? That even the fireballs, like instantly you can hear that sound. And that's the feedback that you're getting from the game itself. And then there's mechanical things as well. All of those, from presentation to mechanical aspects, the game is going to communicate with you whether or not you're being successful or not. Whether it's, you can now access, UI, speaking of UI, sometimes what gets me lost is when a good thing happens and I unlock another aspect of the map. Or maybe you couldn't have magic and now you've unlocked magic. And now you've got this whole thing of, like, this whole magic part of the UI, like all these spells you can choose from. I get lost and I quit. And so, like, how you introduce your player to new parts of the UI can be a risk as well if you don't do that right. Or your stats increasing, or new abilities, or basically it's getting more dice and higher stats on that. So these are just some general. I know I'm going pretty quickly, but those are some general feedback ways the game gives you feedback as to whether or not you're doing well. In Skyrim, these are fun. So when, like, this is particularly fun. So I got a couple of the level up sounds, like when you level up. Who doesn't want it to sound like this? Like, say you just took a test. You're in high school and you just got a grade. Like you get the grade back, but before the grade appears on your test, this is what happens. And then the grades.
C-.
Hey, maybe for C-. I don't think. I mean, if that's the sound for a C-, imagine if you got an A. Maybe it's this one. Here's another one of them. See, that's the fast one. That's the C- right there. The other one, the longer one, is like at least an A-, right? But
for some people,
but that, like, leveling up, you get a
cool.
whole barbarian choir that, like, celebrates your leveling up with you with this epic music, right? The epic realism showing up when you level up. So that's one of the cooler ways to get feedback, and it takes a while. But like, I can hear that and feel the feelings of, I can now give myself a perk, or give like a new stat or something else because of that sound, right? Who doesn't want to unlock that? So those are some of the sounds that can like and for the simpler one when you level up, just the sheath, the sword coming out of its sheath, is a fun, just quick feedback. And sometimes it works better to have quicker versus shorter feedback because you don't want to disrupt the momentum of the game. Like in Mario Brothers, the quick leveling up or whatever else wants to be a fast thing. And then some of the visual ways, this is kind of a fun. This is simultaneously kind of a glitch and a feedback system. To me, it's actually kind of fun. When you die, your character dies. They become sort of a ragdoll, but they continue to interact with the world in that ragdoll state, depending on where you fall. And so this death was particularly fun. Sorry to those who are listening. Basically, there's a hero on a horse, and the horse falls down a cliff, and then the hero falls for quite some time to their death, interacting with different parts of the landscape as they fall. So here's the infamous ragdoll style death in Skyrim. So on the horse and don't jump down a cliff that looks like that in a horse is just general advice. It didn't die in that first fall, that being said. Ooh. And now and there he goes. Just keeps going and going. And I love it. Falls into a waterfall and continues to, the physics in the world, ouch. And then falls into a rock, and there you go. So
that's pretty impressive.
You are definitely
cool.
dead. The game is telling you that you are dead, and it's making you watch the whole process. Right.
Look what you have wrought.
As opposed to fading to black and saying game over. Right? Like you're in this case, the feedback is, look at this cool thing that we can do with the physics of our game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the way. We're going to get all these again as I try. There we go. So here's what I wanted to do, and I don't think we'll do this whole thing, but this is where I wanted you to take some notes without giving spoilers. This is why we went to this whole thing. This is actually the final boss and main quest ending. And there's a lot of, this is just a gameplay video, but I wanted you to take some notes, and we'll go just a few minutes into this. I wanted you to take some notes of how many different kinds of feedback the game is giving you, watching this player play as it goes. So, you've got, and different kinds of feedback are things like how you're interacting with the world. Setting-wise, you're actually in sort of the mythological afterlife of these Norse people, and you're going to fight a dragon. And you have several objectives you're trying to complete to defeat this dragon. And again, I won't show you the whole thing, but even just a few minutes in, see how many different programmed in pieces of feedback you can catalog as we go. Yes? Does that make sense?
Okay, they're ready. Let's do it.
Here we go. And for those listening at home, you get to focus on just the audio elements of feedback, of which there are many. And in some ways, it's fun to turn the wisual off and just see how many audio feedback things there are. So here we go. Hey, that's that whalebone bridge that that guy said he designed. He designed this whole level.
We know this isn't him playing it.
True. There's the misty fog that you have to get rid of. There's the scrolling of the shouts. That's the dragon. The fog came back. Oh, that darn dragon. Puts the mist back.
Does his strength have no end? Is our struggle in vain?
Stand fast. His strength is failing. Once more, and his might will be broken.
Again, and we break his grim hold over Shor's realm and redeem it for eternity. Look!
Okay, I think we need to, in the interest of time, we'll move forward a little bit. Have the dragon. You're fighting the dragon.
Nowhere to hide.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there because I think we just got I think we got a sample of just about all of the feedback things, and if you want to see the rest of what happens, you're gonna have to play the game. I'm gonna see what happens to Alduin the dragon. All right, quick fire. What did you see, feedback wise?
We've got dialogue.
Yes.
The mist itself. There's a compass at the top in the middle, which direction you're pointing. The sound that comes from the dragon when he brings the mist back. Different captions. They just kind of write out what the sounds are.
Yeah.
Or what the dialogue is and who's saying them, which can be pretty helpful. There was a status update that was like level completed or something like that.
Yep.
That showed up. A bunch of health bar there. While they were fighting the dragon, there were 3 health bars, and I think one was, I don't know if it was like magic, health, and stamina along the bottom.
Yep, that's
and
exactly
then
right.
Top middle was the enemy's health bar. There was also, just for a minute, there was a level progress bar that was like level 22, and it kind of showed you as you were fighting. There was a bunch of different sounds of doing things, like casting the spell.
Yes, your shouts. Those are your
could
dragon
tell that
shouts.
Yeah. And I couldn't help picturing Dwight Schrute yelling parkour when he was saying va-cour, which
is
broke the immersion a little bit.
Now I'm not going to be able to play that without thinking of. I think Dwight could take him, though. At least Dwight thinks that Dwight could take him. Yeah, I think.
I mean, if he practiced his parkour, he probably could.
Absolutely.
There were sounds for being wounded.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you took damage, there was a couple different sounds. Sounds when you were dealing damage. Sounds when you were trying to deal damage but didn't succeed. You just like whiffed.
Yes.
So and then there's obviously the dragon you see and his proximity to you or distance, and the fact that he's flying, and the mountain and all the actual stuff you can see.
So the game is that's good work out of you, Professor Swift. That's a lot of that would be the level up sound, and not just a C-. I'd give that at least a B-. I think.
Had a good teacher.
At least. Well, I guess we'll have to see about that when you play the game. But I even love how intuitive it was for you to know that there's magic, hit points, and like endurance down there on the bottom with the different colors. Like it just makes sense now. Why does it make sense now? Right? It shouldn't, but it does. Right? It's like there's a level of literacy there that just makes sense to us. All of those different ways of knowing whether or not you're being successful. Even I'd say like that choir, that epic choir, just sort of getting louder and louder as you're moving into the space, shows you that there's proximity to something epic. Right? Something is coming. Something big is going to happen. And of course, the scene itself, when compared to other scenes in the game, you're already in another world, and now you're really in another world, like from the Northern Lights, the stars, the interaction with that, the new heroes and everything else. So I think you picked up on, I'd say, most of the things that I would hope you pick up on from this little scene, from hit, like when you hit and when you don't and all that kind of stuff. So lots of games do that on a small level when you consider the sheer amount of things going on in this one scene to tell you whether or not you're being successful, and also, by the way, there's lots of different ways to be successful, whether you focus just on using your dragon shouts or your weapons are strong enough, and whether or not you're going to use a sword versus a bow and arrow, or like there's so many different ways to be successful in this scene. There's not just one prescribed way, and the game's going to tell you whether or not you're doing that well. And it is a big fault of a game for you to suffer defeat or even be successful and not know why. Like, imagine if you were trying to swing your sword and there wasn't some kind of feedback as to whether or not you were hitting it. And we could probably think of and list some games where the feedback system wasn't efficient or effective and was the main reason why we couldn't be successful, because we simply didn't know if we were doing it right. And that seems like a simple thing, but so much of our ability to be in flow comes from, and that's one of the elements of flow, instant feedback, knowing whether or not I'm doing well and whether or not I'm meeting the challenge. So Skyrim does that on so many different epic levels, whether it's sound design, visual design, narrative, unlocking of things, etc., etc. There. Highly recommend it. Okay. So I think of that feedback. That's that. Anything else to say or comment or question about feedback?
Whoa.
Well, here we are,
Number
guys.
5.
You're not prepared for number 5. It's about creating a community, a social community with this game, whether the game does that or not. Does it? Mods. There you go, guys. Mods. Did that give you chills?
Singles in your area. Love mods.
Love mods.
You'll never guess.
I will say
the new superfood mods. Gut biologist says mods are the one way to be healthy.
And some of these are going to be really good for you, and some of them are not when it comes to mods. That being said, I do think that just as so obviously the game itself is not a social community creating tool because you play it by yourself. It's designed to be played by itself. That's honestly, as an introvert, that's one of my favorite things. Like when they made the Elder Scrolls Online, I instantly was like, nope, I'm not interested in being owned by a 10-year-old. And like, I like it when it's just me in the world. I actually prefer games that aren't multiplayer. That being said, I do love talking to my friends about the cool thing that I did in game. And so in many ways, I'd say Skyrim just relies on social media itself to be a tool of creating a community, which is good and bad when they're not the ones moderating. When you're not the one moderating that community like you do in a multiplayer game, you do have the potential to be criticized in certain ways, or the community is allowed to get out of hand. That being said, I think one of the things that Todd Howard does to create a community around a game is by encouraging mods. He himself talks about how so many gaming creators, and I do think this takes a certain level of courage and vulnerability for a creator to say, I want you to mess with my game. Here's this game that we spent years and years and years, like I guess the legend of Starfield is it took them like 20 years to make it, right? Here's what we spent all of this time. Not only are we going to encourage you to mod it, we're going to provide you with tools to do so. They created a creation kit that said, here it is, go, mod away. And in many ways, like we talked about UI being so, I just don't think they got that right. For them to say, okay, fix it. And then to have someone fix it and go, okay, you fixed it. And there are games out there where mods have become an incorporated aspect of the game. It happened in Valheim and other places where the mods were so good, they said, hey, you're hired. Like, we need that aspect of our game. So anyway, I think it's a unique, skilled community. Like, you have to know how to make a mod to become a part of that community. That being said, Skyrim has over 100,000 mods available. So obviously there is a vibrant mod making community, and everything from new weapons and new materials, graphics updates to actual bug fixes. Like they have modders who are patching the game itself to make it more reliable. Again, I think that takes guts for a creator to say, we love our creation. We think it's really good on its own. Can you make it better? We dare you. And then to acknowledge you did. Like in these areas, you made it better. The modding community is often what keeps a game relevant. And Todd Howard uniquely encourages mods. And I think, again, that is one way to I don't know. Is something I'm missing about a social element of the gaming community of Skyrim or of these open world games? I can't think of anything.
Cool. I mean, I think mods are huge. I also think there's showing off accomplishments, whether it's something like showing a video of a speed run,
yes.
choked up about this, or if it's like, here's a screenshot of this cool thing I built
Yes.
in an open world game, being able to share creations and we're talking specifically about like open world single player type things, because obviously if you're playing with other people, that's a social aspect.
Right.
But also, and I think of kind of going back to what you said about the community, like when it's not moderated, like you go onto Reddit for pretty much any game, and people will be talking with each other about strategies and the best way to upgrade your character the fastest, and where to farm XP or farm credits or money, or the best hacks.
Yeah, right.
So to speak, or the best trade. So I mean, I think that there's that, but that's not really. I guess the company could try to try to moderate the subreddit or moderate the forums or something like that. But part of that's just, if you have an interesting game where there are different strategies and different outcomes, then that kind of encourages people to share
That's a good point.
best practices. And if there's just one right answer, then maybe there's not really a need to.
Yeah.
I mean, not really to debate it much.
Right.
But if it's just like, well, here's how you do it, and then there's the one how-to guide, and then you're done, then.
Yeah.
Well,
so maybe the best way to encourage social interaction with your game is to make a really, really good game, and then people are going to talk about it, even if the game itself doesn't necessarily. And this is, I'm sure, going to be a deeper topic when we talk about how games, either historically or currently, are successful in managing these social elements and these social interactions. But in the case of Skyrim, it's not necessarily the mod creation is the one thing they do in-house that I think encourages that. Yeah. But otherwise, good point. Okay.
Shocking.
Well,
that's awesome.
Shocking. Well, there we go. We did it. It was shocking. So the main question is, and we probably, I don't know, maybe we need to come up with a scoring system, like some kind of, give this 10 pixels,
feedback,
8 pixels, 7.5 pixels out of
a million
of pixels. I don't know. Maybe we need a rating system. So I didn't even think about that. So maybe we need to think about that for next time. But in terms of feedback, I would love to know, and this is the ultimate level of nerdiness, but what didn't we cover? What could we have covered more? This was a quick, even in 3 parts, I think, overview of a game in which every single one of these elements could have, maybe except for social elements, could have a pretty big deep dive. As we're like a half hour over what I normally want to do on this, but there's just so much to talk about. So so
much good stuff.
Our completion rate might not be as good on this one in terms of people watching it all the way through, except for you enticed them, I'm sure, with your social media prowess. So yes, please tell us how we did. Tell us how I did. How did I do on this framework, and how can we do better? Are there other games that you would love for us to do? Let's come out of here. Are there again other frameworks that we should be looking at? Please give us suggestions. What else am I supposed to be telling you to do? What we need to talk about next week. So that's Skyrim. That's the whole game of Skyrim.
Yeah.
That we need to talk about.
Right.
So what's our
I
topic
don't need
for
to play
next
it
week?
anymore.
Yeah, well, we do need to play it. That's going to be next. But
well, I know everything about it.
You sure don't. That's the beauty, is you don't know anything about it.
That's true. Okay. I mean, I know something about it.
Maybe a little bit, but just wait till you play it. Then you'll know. So
next week we're going to talk about a book that is soon to hit the shelves at an Amazon.com near you called Mindful Gaming, which is a book that I've been writing for a while.
Yes.
And working on and honing, and it's a parent's guide to video games, or a guide for parent. Wow, I need to work on the pitch a little bit, don't I?
We're going to practice.
I've clearly been working on the book longer than the pitch. I've been working on like the design of the cover and stuff like that for so long that I can't even. It's something has to do something with video games and being mindful.
And being mindful. You should play games mindfully.
Play
Rather
games
than-
mindfully.
It's about being selective, right? It's about choosing what you play and how you play, and in a purposeful way. About being on purpose. I loved your thoughts on this, and you've been working on this for a long time. And
you gave me feedback on a draft.
I did,
and it was helpful.
and it's so good. Like, I can't wait to talk about this. I think it's a key tenet of everything we're talking about here is how to do this whole thing on purpose, and not just letting what you consume you. Ooh, there's your pitch. Maybe I'm gonna try for that.
I'm gonna see if I can still change the subtitle.
Yeah,
or the title. Maybe it should be the title.
It just feels a little science fiction-y. I don't know. Because now I'm imagining Check's
High
quest
fantasy.
and being consumed by phlegmoids. Phlegm.
That's true. That's true.
But anyway, so
Mindful Gaming next week. Stay tuned.
so
9
good.
out of 10 dentists are going to be shocked in your area based on the Mindful Gaming episode next week.
Yes, they will. Gosh, pitching. This is what you're really good at. Like, you're just really, really good.
No, I'm terrible at pitching. I'm great at clickbait.
Oh, yes. I would click on that for sure. So, main message here. Well, the main message here. After all of that, thank you for sticking around with us for our first game analysis. Again, please tell us how we did. Please like and subscribe. Please follow us. Spotify is right now our main medium for delivery of this excellence in podcasting thing. And
Pixel-like. All other podcasts are pixel-like.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And we are moving to YouTube. So this actually should be the second thing on YouTube once we figure that whole thing out. So if you are coming to us on YouTube, like and subscribe and hit the alert button. Please, on both of those, all of these platforms, wherever you're hearing us, please leave us a 5-star rating. Please like.
The cool thing is, when you do those things, that victory sound will play.
Ooh.
The one that the Skyrim one.
Yeah.
If you don't believe me, try it.
Yes, you
and
might
see
as well.
If, you might as well try it.
You are
Just
really
hit
good
the
on this
subscribe button,
clickbait.
and it's like.
That's the exact sound it made. We need to capture that sound and let it be the main feedback when anything happens.
Don't click it again, because then you unsubscribe, and then
no.
and then it's a really bad sound, and you lose a bunch of health and stamina.
And you don't want to hear that one for sure.
And that's IRL, and that's not the character.
Join us on social media, and guys, let's play games.
Let's play some games.
Bye, everybody.